The late afternoon sun hung heavy over the small town of Ashwood, a sleepy place nestled in the heart of rural Pennsylvania. Most people would drive right past it without a second thought. But for those who knew the undercurrents of the local criminal world, Ashwood was a hotspot, especially for one thing: drugs. And that's where Sergeant Logan Razor Hayes came in. A decorated former Army Ranger turned special agent at the U.S. Counter-Narcotics Office, CNO Razor was no stranger to high-stakes operations. But his current mission in Ashwood wasn't part of some covert operation overseas. It was right here, on American soil, where the Blackthorn Crew, a notorious biker gang linked to a massive drug trafficking ring, had been pushing weight through the rural highways. Razor had been working undercover for months, gathering intel on the bikers and the local drug syndicates that had their claws sunk deep into the community. His job was simple: stop the flow of narcotics before they could wreck more lives. But today, things were about to take a dangerous turn. It all started when Razor, in his civilian clothes, walked into the local bar, the Rusty Wheel, where the bikers often gathered. His intel indicated that one of the Blackthorn leaders, a hulking man named Grimm, was meeting a few associates there to finalize a major deal. The job seemed straightforward: blend in, get the intel, and report back. But as soon as Razor stepped through the door, he felt the eyes on him. Grimm, a towering figure covered in tattoos, locked eyes with Razor. Something about the man's presence suggested trouble. Razor's instincts kicked in. He knew Grimm was a dangerous man, but he didn't expect the situation to escalate so quickly. "Hey, look who decided to show up," Grimm sneered, standing up from his booth and walking toward Razor. The other bikers, many of them hulking figures with wild beards and leather jackets, stopped their conversations, focusing on the interaction. Razor didn't flinch. He kept his expression neutral, giving nothing away. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a trained professional who'd faced tougher situations than this. But even he knew that underestimating a biker gang like Blackthorn could be fatal. "You lost, friend?" Grimm asked with a sinister smile, running a hand through his long, greasy hair. "Or are you just looking for trouble?" Razor knew better than to show weakness. He kept his cool, leaning slightly forward. "Just here for a drink," he said, his voice low and steady. Grimm wasn't convinced. He eyed Razor suspiciously, his gaze narrowing. "You know, we don't take kindly to outsiders who think they can just waltz in here." The room grew tense, but Razor wasn't backing down. His hand subtly rested near the knife he carried on his belt, just in case things got ugly. He had the training to handle himself, but the question was, did he want to? Or was it smarter to wait for backup? Before he could decide, one of Grimm's men, a younger biker with a reckless gleam in his eye, stepped forward. "What's a pretty boy like you doing here, huh? You think you're tough?" The biker shoved Razor's shoulder, testing him. The room went silent. Razor's military training was built on control, on using only as much force as necessary. He could have snapped the guy's arm in an instant, but that would have only fueled the fire. He needed to be smart, to make sure his cover wasn't blown. But the young biker wasn't done. He pushed again, harder this time. Razor's patience wore thin. He could feel the heat of the moment building. The soldier inside him, the man who had stared down enemies in faraway lands, who had faced ambushes and firefights, wasn't going to let a low-level punk intimidate him. With lightning speed, he grabbed the biker's wrist, twisted it behind his back, and shoved him into one of the tables. The force of it knocked the wind out of the man, who gasped and crumpled to the floor. "Last warning," Razor growled, his voice cold. "Leave it." The room went deathly quiet. Razor stood, his posture calm but commanding, as Grimm and the other bikers exchanged wary glances. No one expected the quiet man to be so quick, so ruthless. Grimm's smirk faded. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone who clearly wasn't intimidated. "You think you can just walk in here and walk out, huh?" Grimm's voice was low, filled with menace. "You don't know who you're messing with." Razor stepped closer, his eyes locked on Grimm. "I know exactly who I'm messing with. But you're the one who's about to regret it." Before Grimm could react, Razor moved faster than anyone expected, disarming the man and pinning him against the wall with one swift move. The other bikers hesitated, unsure if they should back up their leader or bail. Razor's grip tightened on Grimm's collar, and his voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "You're running a drug operation in my town. You want to fight me? Fine. But first, you need to know this. I'm not just names. I'm with the counter-narcotics office, and this ends tonight." Grimm's eyes went wide in realization, but it was too late. Razor had already called for backup, and the sound of approaching sirens could be heard in the distance. The bikers scattered, realizing the jig was up. Some tried to flee, but the local law enforcement, tipped off by Razor's call, was already waiting outside. Within minutes, the entire Blackthorn crew was handcuffed, their plans for another shipment of narcotics thwarted. As Grimm was hauled away, Razor stood outside the bar, watching the dust settle. He didn't celebrate, he never did. For him, this was just another day in the fight. But the town of Ashwood was a little safer tonight, and that was enough. For Razor, it wasn't about the thrill of the fight. It was about making sure that people who couldn't defend themselves stayed safe. That was the job. And, as always, Razor had done it his way.